vote for Trump. And then in 2020, you did, which is not the normal pattern for people in your position, right? And you talked about that vote pretty honestly. You said, I decided to vote for him in 2020. That way I can say with a straight face, I voted for him. I know he's not going to win, but I can say I did it. And so I have credit with the base. But you told the Post you felt, quote, dirty casting that ballot in 2020. It is not something I can square away in my soul fully. Do you think other members of Congress are facing the same internal anguish when they make these calls?
Yeah, how can you not? I mean, look, I think it's important to be open and honest about that. It was a cowardice vote for me. There's a lot of cowardice votes that are being taken daily in the House. And I got to tell you, besides, just a few of my colleagues, there are so many that I know have stuffed down that kind of the little bird on your shoulder, the little angel that's whispering, you're really destroying this country with these votes and who you're supporting. They've stuffed it down. They've tried to justify it by saying, well, if I don't run again, somebody crazier is going to come. But what's happened is people like Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy bears 90% of the weight, I think, for Donald Trump's return. He is a failed leader who has absolutely nothing more than his own power in his mind, and he resurrected Donald Trump. I got to tell you, if he's ever around a mirror, I can't imagine that's easy to look at him unless he's just that cold and calculated.
But you were an ally. Kevin McCarthy was an ally of yours when you came into office. You were one of his proteges, if you will. Did you not see that back then, that he was just nakedly after power, or do you think something changed?
Well, I guess in hindsight, you can see that. I knew he was a very good politician, and he is. He goes with the wind. He goes where, it's going to take him to higher power. He knows everybody's name. He knows something about you. And I knew that there was a lot of politician-y to that. But at the time, at least, we didn't have Donald Trump yet. When he came and you all of a sudden start seeing people, it's not just about differences of opinion. We need differences of opinions in this country, but it's about swallowing authoritarian moves, destroying the Constitution, and changing how we respect the government. And I saw him start working on behalf of Trump for that and not lead. I mean, Liz Cheney and I can speak out against Donald Trump, and we're going to keep doing this. Kevin McCarthy's the one that people would listen to. He's a leader, and he's too cowardice to do it, and people need to recognize that.
I mean, there's the power aspect of it, but then there are people who legitimately believe that you leaving the party, as it were, to hold Trump accountable is a moral abomination. And some of those people are in your own family. You shared, I believe, a letter right after you called for Trump to be removed from office under the 25th Amendment. 11 members of your family sent you this letter. I'll just quote some choice lines. Adam, oh my, what a disappointment you are to us and to God. We were once so proud of your accomplishments. Instead, you go against your Christian principles and join the devil's army, the Democrats and the fake news media. Adam, they are not going to like this appearance this evening on MSNBC. But, I mean, you know what happened with Kevin McCarthy, right? I mean, that's a fairly ABC, I can be maybe the next Speaker of the House. I'm Kevin McCarthy. I'm going to stay in power. But what about members of your own family? And I ask that not just to get you to, be critical of members of your own family, but because I think they're representative of a lot of Republicans in the country who don't hold elected office and are in thrall to Donald Trump and are voting against Liz Cheney, who otherwise is everything you could want from a conservative Republican.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to talk about. So first off, I've come to believe over the last year that people, more than even fearing death, we're such a tribalistic people that they fear being kicked out of their tribe. And so you accept anything because now republicanism or conservatism or Trumpism becomes your identity. And so you're going to stay. Now, my family, look, they're my dad's cousins. I'm going to say this as a Christian myself, the pastors, many pastors in this country are failing their congregation, not even just by, pushing kind of Trumpism from the pulpit, but even refusing to talk about how bad it is, how corrosive it is. And you have people today that literally, I think in their heart, they may not say it, but they equate Donald Trump with the person of Jesus Christ. And to them, if you even come out against this amazing man, Donald Trump, which, I mean, obviously quite flawed, you are coming out against Jesus, against their Christian values. And when you go after their religion, that violates the depth of who they are. And I've been kicked out of my tribe, and that's okay.
And you seem okay with it. You are doing it with your head held high. I guess I want to just close this out by asking you about, tonight we may see the departure of Liz Cheney for all intents and purposes from Congress. Sarah Palin is in a primary in Alaska, may very well make it to Congress as the lone congressperson from Alaska, may being the operative word there. Donald Trump is suggesting he may run again in 2024. What do you think the road ahead is? You won't be in Congress, but you know what's going on with the GOP. What happens now?
Well, I, like a lot of people, feel politically homeless. This is obviously is nothing near the party I joined. I have a movement. It's Country First, country1st.com, and we've played against Madison Cawthorn. We've played on behalf of Brad Raffensperger. We've played in Michigan and some other places. And what we're trying to do is to say to Democrats that live in a district that you know is going to go Republican, one of those that's not competitive, hey, in certain areas, consider taking out a Republican ballot and voting against these crazies. So I personally am going to be focused on that. And I love calling out the garbage that is being done to abuse people. The abusive emails that say 7 times match, or just give me $10, or Donald Trump knows you haven't given this quarter. It's all lies. And it's abusing people, many of which are seniors and on a fixed income. So I'm excited to be able to go out and continue to fight that battle, because somebody's got to. People are being just abused, and obviously the Republicans have become a cult. So I'm going to try to pull people from that cult if I can.
Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger, you seem ready for the fight. Member of the January 6th committee, best of luck with all of your efforts, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thanks. We are just getting in our first results in tonight from Wyoming. We will hear from the great Steve Kornacki in just a moment, and new details tonight in the search at Mar-a-Lago. A judge will soon decide whether we can see the reasoning behind the DOJ search of Trump's country club home. We will be joined live here in studio by a former prosecutor. You know her well, Joyce Vance. That's next. And then why President Obama is tweeting tonight that something is a, quote, BFD. Much more ahead here this evening, tonight. Stay with us. We are getting in our first votes from the Wyoming primary, where Liz Cheney is in the fight of her political life. Let us go now to Steve Kornacki at the big board. Steve, at the risk of asking a leading question, how bad does it look for Liz Cheney in the state of Wyoming?
It looks bad for Liz Cheney. It looks as bad as people were saying it was in the run-up to this. About 10 minutes ago, we started to get numbers out. What you see here is a 16-point lead right now for Cheney's Trump-backed challenger, Harriet Hageman. And the numbers may be worse than that for Cheney. I'll show you why. What we're looking at right now, this is Natrona County. This is the second largest county in the state. This is where Casper, Wyoming is. And what you're seeing here is the absentee vote. See, it's a little less than half of all the vote from Natrona County. One of the biggest counties in the state, and it's the absentee vote. And one of the things we've expected coming into tonight, and one of the things we have seen in primary after primary this year, is that the Trump-backed candidates do much better in the Election Day vote. The folks who go out to the polls and vote on Election Day, that tends to be a very pro-Trump demographic. And these numbers are not taking that into account. These are not the Election Day votes. These are the mailed-in ballots. This is the early voting. This tends to be the vote that's the most skeptical of Trump and that's the most favorable to the candidates who are opposed by Trump. So this is the friendliest batch of votes likely that Liz Cheney is going to get out of the second largest county in Wyoming. And already it puts her in that county 9 points behind Hageman. So if the pattern that we've seen elsewhere holds in primaries all across the country, then when the same day vote comes in Natrona County, Hageman's lead here is going to grow. And again, this is one of the big counties. Here is what I think we're going to see in some of the smaller ones around the state. This isn't too small. This is Sweetwater County. But here you're looking at, again, we've got the absentee vote here from Sweetwater County. And Hageman's already running well over 70% of the vote here. Again, they're going to end up up with 5, 6, 7,000 votes or so total out of this county, and Hageman's already rolling up the score against Liz Cheney. There's a lot of Sweetwater counties around the state when you just look at sort of their political leanings. So you put just those two together right away, and you don't have the makings of the kind of surprise that Liz Cheney was hoping for. Where could she look on this map? I mean, this is geographically big, where Jackson Hole is. This is an anomaly in Wyoming. This is a blue county. Biden won it by 38 points. This, though, while geographically big, only makes up about 5% of the primary vote. Cheney will do well there. Albany County down here, again, this is where the University of Wyoming is, the only other county in the state that Joe Biden carried. He carried it by 3 points. But again, you're talking about a small fraction of the votes are going to come out of these two counties. These are the only two obvious places on this map where I see Liz Cheney really potentially having a big night. And could it be possibly big enough in places like this to offset what we're already seeing in Sweetwater County and we're already seeing in Natrona County? It gets tough to see. So more will be coming in here. Wyoming is a slow counting state. But again, if you're Liz Cheney, I think one benchmark you wanted to see was you wanted that early vote in Natrona County. You wanted to be winning it.
Steve, what about the phenomenon we're hearing Democrats changing their registrations in Wyoming so that they can vote in the Republican primary for Liz Cheney? Do we have any metrics? Do we have any data that suggests that that is happening in any kind of significant fashion?
Yeah, I think it's happened. I think significance the key word there. We could put it this way. Let's compare where party registration in Wyoming stood coming into today with where it was at the start of the year. So that's the question. Have folks left the Democratic Party, joined the Republican Party this year? Now, the answer is, I think, to some degree, yes. On January 1st, there were over 45,000 registered Democrats in Wyoming. That number's down to 36,000 coming into today. Now, there could be any number of reasons for folks to leave the Democratic Party, but if we just accept the premise for the sake of argument that, hey, let's say every single one of these was a Democrat who wanted to re-register Republican to vote in today's primary, I mean, you could see that's about 10,000 votes that Liz Cheney could get out of that. That's, not nothing. But you're talking about a Republican electorate here of potentially over 200,000 voters. And when we've seen polling in this race and you've looked at folks who are registered Republicans, that's where Harriet Hageman has just run up massive, massive numbers against Liz Cheney. So if Cheney could bring in 10,000 new votes into this Republican pool, wouldn't hurt her. But that's small. That's sort of the pebble in the ocean, I guess, might be the analogy you're going for there. The Republican registration advantage is just so massive. And then among Republicans, Hageman's advantage has just been so massive. So I think it's happened, but I don't even know if it's possible in a state like in Wyoming to happen on this kind of scale somebody like Liz Cheney would need it to happen. She needs to make inroads with folks who are Republicans before January 1st, 2022.
More a thorn in the side of the Republican elephant than I'll just leave that metaphor there. Steve Kornacki, thank you.
We're better than mine, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Steve. We will be checking in with you, as we do throughout the night. Okay, up next, the judge who authorized the search warrant on Mar-a-Lago sets a date for a hearing on whether he will release the affidavit that convinced him to authorize the search. Former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance joins us live right here, coming up next. It has been 8 days since the FBI searched former President Trump's Palm Beach home, and just 4 days since a federal judge released the search warrant, revealing that the FBI had taken 11 sets of classified documents from Mar-a-Lago, including several top secret sets of documents. In the days since, we've learned that Attorney General Merrick Garland deliberated for weeks about whether or not to approve the application for the search warrant of Trump's home. That is how sensitive it was. Amidst all of this, though, there is one important element that we have not gotten a lot of information on. We have not gotten access to the underlying sworn affidavit by an FBI agent that outlines why there was probable cause to think evidence of federal crimes would be found at Mar-a-Lago. That affidavit was essentially the basis for the search warrant. The Justice Department has said that releasing that affidavit to the public would, quote, cause significant and irreparable damage to this ongoing criminal investigation because because the investigation involves highly classified materials. But despite that, today, a federal judge set a hearing to decide whether or not to unseal the affidavit. That is scheduled for this Thursday. As we wait to hear what happens on that front, I do want to bring up one point that seems potentially underexplored in the analysis of the search warrant materials. One of the documents FBI agents uncovered and took with them from Mar-a-Lago was listed as a, quote, executive grant of clemency regarding Roger Jason Stone Jr. You may remember that Trump granted not one, but two executive grants of clemency for his old friend and advisor, Roger Stone. So there could be a totally innocent and truly boring explanation here. Maybe there was just an extra copy of that grant of clemency lying around, and that extra copy just happened to be on top of or next to the classified documents that the FBI picked up. But maybe not. And maybe there is more to it. Last week, the day after the FBI executed a search warrant at Trump's Florida home, Robert Costa of CBS News reported that, quote, some January 6th committee members have been investigating quietly the trail of Trump's documents for months about pardons and are probing whether any private pardon papers exist, and if so, if they're held by Trump/aides. We have no idea what that Roger Stone clemency document could be, the one that the FBI took from Mar-a-Lago. But it could have been a private pardon, meaning a pardon Trump granted secretly without the Justice Department or virtually anyone else knowing. There is no way to tell right now. There's no way. But if this reporting is correct, that the January 6th committee is investigating whether or not private pardon papers exist, well, now then, you have my attention. And I have just the person to ask right here about this. My next guest has quite the resume. She spent 18 years as a federal prosecutor in Birmingham, Alabama, before becoming a U.S. attorney. In 2009, she was one of the first 5 U.S. attorneys there she is, to be nominated by President Barack Obama when he took office. In fact, she was the first female U.S. attorney he named and was then unanimously confirmed by the Senate. No small feat. Joyce Vance spent nearly the entirety of Barack Obama's 2 terms as president, almost 8 years as the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama. That's why she's here. I mean, among other reasons. Joining us now, Joyce Vance. It is so great to have you here. Thank you for joining me, Joyce.
Good to see you, Alex.
So I want to explore this private pardon papers scenario, right? The fact that this Roger Stone clemency document was taken when the FBI seized papers from Mar-a-Lago. Normally, pardons go through the DOJ's, I believe it is, Office of the Pardon, right?
The pardon attorney, right, who routinely handles all pardons.
Is it possible that Trump has a stash of private pardon papers that might intersect with some of the things he did around January 6th?
My temptation is to tell you, absolutely not, it's impossible. But this is Trump that we're talking about, right? He didn't do things like anyone else. The reason you have a pardon attorney is so there's an official record of a president granting pardons while he's in office, the only time he has access to the pardon power, which is very broad and expansive. Could Trump have done these privately? I suppose he could have, but there's one limitation. Even Trump would have to create some form of a record that that pardon was issued while he was in office, right? He doesn't today at Mar-a-Lago have the power to pardon anyone.
Despite what you might say, I mean, I think one of the reasons this is interesting is because of all the other rhetoric that's coming out of Trump land vis-a-vis these documents at Mar-a-Lago, right? We know that Trump is the person that's saying he had sort of unilateral capabilities to declassify information, and that all of the things he took with him to Mar-a-Lago were things that he had declassified. I mean, effectively, I'll read the statement. President Trump, in order to prepare for work the next day, often took documents, including classified documents, to the residence. He had a standing order. Standing order. The documents removed from the Oval Office and taken to the residence were deemed to be declassified. The moment he removed them, like, boom, I can declassify something by virtue of the fact that I'm Donald Trump. Someone who thinks he has that power to just boom declassify things could also maybe think he has the power to issue pardons willy-nilly without having to go through the appropriate channels.
You know, it's not beyond belief. I got stuck, though, on the part that you read it, at the part where he was saying to prepare for work the following morning, right? It just defied belief. But I think that you're right, that this is someone who was never constrained by normal, smooth operations in the White House, which depended upon creating a record, because we're a rule of law country, and we keep records and record these sort of items, whether it's classification of important national security documents or reflecting pardons granted by a president.
When we talk about the documents in and around the Mar-a-Lago, I will call it scandal, but investigation, seizure, there's a lot of interest in this affidavit from the FBI agent to explain why they were going down there. A judge is going to have a hearing on that on Thursday. What is your expectation from that? And if the affidavit isn't released, should we infer anything from that about the seriousness of this investigation?
Well, the affidavit is always the juicy part of the search warrant. Everything else is filling out papers that to some extent are boilerplate. But in the affidavit, as you laid out, the agent collects all of the information that has led the government to believe that there's a crime that merits investigation. So you and I and everybody else out there who's listening wants to read that. But DOJ's interest is in keeping all of that secret, and they lay it out in this motion that you began to read from. And here's the problem. From where I sat as a prosecutor, if someone could read my agent's affidavit, they would have a roadmap for where I was going next in the investigation. And there are real problems, particularly when you have a situation where witnesses could be intimidated. Future witnesses might not come forward, right? I mean, this is a real sort of a risk here. Some sorts of information that are contained in affidavits can't be released. Anything that's obtained using the grand jury legally has to remain private prior to charges being brought. And then because of the nature of this case, there's the entire specter of classified information being included in the affidavit. I would be stunned if the judge ruled that this affidavit should be unsealed and released to the public.
I mean, and let's be clear, Merrick Garland apparently, according to our reporting, wrestled with this decision to raid Mar-a-Lago for weeks. He is not known as a knee-jerk, shoot-from-the-hip attorney general kind of dude. The fact that we are admitting it's an ongoing criminal investigation, these are all measurable, tangible signals that this is pretty serious.
I think that's right. So I have to push back a little bit on the characterization of it as a raid, because this is a search warrant that a federal judge authorized based on probable cause, which I know you know.
And we will be careful with our language on this.
But I think the second part of what you said is something that hasn't been said enough and that's very important. The whole country's been waiting to see what Merrick Garland is doing. This week, Merrick Garland told us that he has a criminal investigation, and he had the authority from that judge to go in and seize the office at Mar-a-Lago called 45.
Merrick Garland, nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney, thank you for being here tonight, Joyce. I sincerely appreciate it. We'll be right back. Quick programming note before we go. At midnight, we will be back on the air with another live show, because why not? We'll be covering Alaska's primary and special election, where, among other things, former vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin is hoping to make a political comeback as a congresswoman. Again, that is right here at midnight. Before we go, I just want to thank my esteemed colleagues for all the work that they have done here over the past few weeks as we have built this show from the bottom up. Ali Velshi, Mehdi Hassan, Ayman Mohideen have done incredible work holding down this hour ahead of our launch, and for that, I am incredibly, forever grateful. Thank you. And on a final note, please don't forget to set your DVRs for Alex Wagner tonight.